Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast, available every morning on Apple, Spotify or wherever you listen. It's Thursday, the 24th of October here in London. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Coming up today, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump step up their rhetoric, accusing each other of being threats to democracy, as Bloomberg's latest polls show them tied in key swing states.
Tesla's shares jump as the electric car maker reports big profits and bigger growth ambitions.
Plus, clubbed together, the UK government beefs up plans for a football regulator, with the Premier League complaining it's being treated like a bank.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
Kamala Harris has labelled her presidential rival Donald Trump a fascist. The comments underline the high stakes in the coming election, with both candidates labelling the other a threat to democracy. The Democratic Vice President was asked by CNN's Anderson Cooper about press reports that Trump had repeatedly suggested Adolf Hitler did some good things.
It is close, but there are undecided voters who clearly, by being here, have an open mind, want to talk in a way that is grounded in issues and fact. And when they hear these facts, I think it compels a lot of people to be concerned about the future of our country with Donald Trump at the lead.
You've quoted General Milley calling Donald Trump a fascist. You yourself have not used that word to describe him. Let me ask you tonight, do you think Donald Trump is a fascist?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Donald Trump responded online to those comments from Harris, saying she has a warped mind and is a threat to democracy. A Bloomberg News Morning Consult poll puts Harris and Trump neck and neck in all key 7 swing states, with only a 1% margin of error.
German Finance Minister Christian Lindner has warned Donald Trump against starting a trade war with the EU. Speaking to Bloomberg, the leader of the pro-business free Democrats called instead for transatlantic solidarity to stand up to China.
There won't be success for anyone out of a trade controversy between the US and the European Union. It is not in the interest of the US to follow protectionism. We have to deal together with People's Republic of China.
Christian Lindner speaking there. His comments reflect widespread concern in Europe after Donald Trump vowed to inflict harsh tariffs on the region if elected president in November. Lindner is meeting with investors in New York and visited the United Nations headquarters. His next stop is Washington to join the annual meetings of the IMF and World Bank.
Tesla has posted its best quarterly results in more than a year as its Cybertruck sales turned a profit for the first time. The EV maker's adjusted net income for the third quarter rose by 8% from a year ago to $2.5 billion, beating the $2.1 billion estimate. On the earnings call, CEO Elon Musk promised to make Tesla the most valuable company in the world, starting with its vehicle sales targets.
I do want to give some rough estimate, which is I think it's 20 to 30% vehicle growth next year, notwithstanding negative external events.
The billionaire also used the earnings call for his only publicly traded company to tout what he would do with a potential job in the Trump administration should the former president get back into the White House. Tesla shares soared by 12% in post-market trading in New York, potentially erasing much of the 14% decline the stock has seen so far this year.
Boeing factory workers have rejected a new labour contract that would increase pay by 35% over 4 years. Workers have been angered by paltry wage increases over the past decade and specifically the failure to reinstate their defined benefit pension plan. Boeing's new CEO, Kelly Ortberg, who gave his first public presentation ahead of the vote, laid out a blunt assessment of what must change at Boeing for the company to move forward, including ending the strike.
Boeing's an airplane company, and at the right time in the future, we need to develop a new airplane. But we have a lot of work to do before then. This includes stabilizing our business, improving the execution on the development programs, streamlining the portfolio to do what we do well, and restoring the balance sheet so that we do have a path to the next commercial aircraft.
That was Boeing's new CEO. The strike has derailed the plane maker's financial recovery and is said to be costing it about $100 million a day in lost revenue. Boeing's shares have lost about 40% of their value this year. The vote means Boeing and the union will head back to the negotiating table.
Andrew Bailey says inflation is cooling faster than officials expected. But speaking during an event in Washington on Wednesday, the Bank of England governor also expressed concerns about the structural changes in the economy and called for increased investment. The comments are the latest from the central bank chief to suggest that the BOE will continue to lower interest rates at its next policy meeting on the 7th of November.
Keir Starmer says that there is no reason for entrepreneurs to leave Britain. The Prime Minister's comments to reporters travelling with him to a summit come as wealthy individuals raise concerns about proposals to increase taxes in next week's budget. Leslie McLeod-Miller, the CEO of the lobby group Foreign Investors for Britain, has told Bloomberg that the plans will lead to a mass exodus.
If you are a foreign investor and you have generational wealth in somewhere like India, and you're asked to pay inheritance tax because you've brought up your children here, why would you do that? You won't do it. People who have been here for many years and bringing up their children want to stay in this country, but also want to pay a fair rate of tax.
Leslie McLeod-Miller there speaking to Bloomberg Radio. Chancellor Rachel Reeves is seeking to raise some £40 billion for the economy and is reportedly considering changes to inheritance, property and capital gains taxes. In a moment, we'll bring you more on our latest US election poll of key swing states, plus details of Tesla's earnings that have added $80 billion to the car maker's market value. But first, another story has caught our eye. This is about the plan to beef up a new football regulator here in the UK. Our colleagues David Hellier and Ellen Milligan have been writing about that story this morning.
Yeah, this is a plan that Labour inherited from the previous Conservative administration, and they've added more powers to the plans for this football regulator, in particular giving it powers to decide how the Premier League will distribute money to smaller clubs in lower divisions. We've had some of these really historic clubs going bust in the UK and facing huge financial difficulty. So the current system allows the Premier League to distribute a large part of the money to parachute payments for clubs that fall out of the Premier League down to some of the lower divisions. Thinking is that's potentially not fair and giving those clubs an unfair advantage. So a regulator would be able to step in under these plans with a final decision on how much the Premier League distributes to smaller clubs if it can't come to an agreement itself with the English Football League, which governs the 72 clubs that are below the top tier. Premier League isn't happy about this.
No, they aren't. It's extraordinary, though, because the Premier League clubs obviously make such an enormous amount of money, and yet the spending on players and so on means that they are often in this kind of precarious situation. And certainly the clubs that are lower down the league in the other divisions, they are under pressure. And those parachute payments you mentioned, it incentivises the others to spend a lot. Maybe they can't afford to do that. But it's, the Labour government, though, interestingly, has made quite a lot of changes to this bill that, as you'd expect, for football-loving Britain...
and football-loving Prime Minister.
Yes, football-loving Prime Minister. Very controversial bill, so we're keeping an eye on that story.
Well, let's turn to the latest in the US election campaign now. Less than 2 weeks to go. The latest Bloomberg News Morning Consult poll showing the two candidates statistically tied in each of the 7 key battleground states. This as Kamala Harris used this televised town hall event to point to the differences between herself and her rival Donald Trump, labelling him a fascist. Let's bring in our EMEA News Director Rosalind Matheson for more on this. Ros, let's start with the polling then. Take us through the details. How close is the race looking?
Well, as you were saying, it's incredibly close. It's statistically tied, 49% support each amongst likely voters, and the margin of error, of course, that is 1 percentage point, which just points again to a race that's anyone's to win. But also the challenge at this point is what's going to move the needle for either Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. How do you get ahead of your competitor? How do you mobilize voters to come out? What kinds of things can you talk about, can you do at this point, 10 days before the US election, to get any change? And they're kind of leaning in a bit on some of the things that they've been talking about. I mean, Harris is seen in this poll, as you were noting, she's seen as mentally fit, she's seen as honest and compassionate. Donald Trump is seen as dangerous by some people, but also seen as having some strengths of his own, particularly being a strong leader. And most importantly, he's seen as more capable on the economy. And that's really where, in the end, you're going to see voters come out on the day primarily, is on election, or is on the economy and economic policy. And so with it so very tight, is it just going to be them talking about economic policy that's going to move the needle? It's very hard to see what can shift daylight here.
The CNN town hall in Pennsylvania, it was a big moment for Harris. She accused Trump of being a fascist. How effective do you think that sort of language is going to be?
Well, she is really honing in on the suggestion that Donald Trump is unstable and not fit to serve. So not just talking about her policies on the economy, say, or migration, but about Trump as a candidate himself, saying, as you said, that he's a fascist. That comes after the former White House Chief of Staff, John Kelly, in an interview said that Trump was basically a fascist. It's a bit of a risky strategy in a way. It reflects, again, how close those polls are, because you're not going to convince your loyal voters any further. They think what they think already about Trump. Will it really pull over those undecided voters? And interestingly, Harris had been talking about staying above the fray, even as Donald Trump has mounted some very personal and often quite vicious attacks on her. So it's unclear how much this might benefit her at this point. She's obviously also drawing comparisons now to Donald Trump about his age, his mental fitness to do the job. But given that this poll shows that he's seen as being quite strong again on the economy, and certainly as a strong leader when he was in power the first time around, it's unclear to me how much this strategy is going to achieve anything.
Yeah, and indeed Donald Trump's response saying that Kamala Harris is a threat to democracy and not fit to be president either. And what else did we learn from this town hall? Was there any more detail on policy from Kamala Harris?
There were some questions about economic policy, and mostly again around the cost of living. So Kamala Harris has talked about raising the minimum wage, essentially doubling it, stopping taxes on tips, as has Donald Trump. But she also talked in the town hall about cracking down on grocery price gouging. And she argued that Trump's propensity for tariffs, of course, he has called them beautiful things, would only lead to inflation. But she was also a little bit woolly in a way. She was pressed on what bills she'd focus on with Congress. She wouldn't say. There's a narrative that she's been a bit coy about some of her policy stances, and deliberately so, not to pen herself in before she would to take office and to limit the scope for attacks on her. But the downside is that risks her looking a little vague. And clear at this point, given, again, the consult poll, the Bloomberg consult poll that's just out, the voters, specifics around economic policy at this point are key.
OK, Ros, thank you so much for being with us. That is Bloomberg's EMEA News Director, Rosalind Matheson.
Well, shares in Tesla soared in after-hours trading on Wall Street after the electric car maker reported earnings that beat expectations. Elon Musk promising a 20 to 30% increase in deliveries next year, as he says he wants to make Tesla the most valuable company in the world. Bloomberg's Katrina Nicholas joins us now for more on this. Katrina, talk us through then what impressed investors in these results.
Yeah, well, look, this was a really blowout quarter for the electric car maker. Its most profitable results in more than a year. The third quarter earnings that we saw were buoyed by its sales of the Cybertruck, which actually turned a profit for the first time, Tesla's energy storage business, which is going very well, and a spike in regulatory tax credits, which are these things that Tesla sells to other automakers so they can meet their emissions rules. Adjusted earnings came in at 72 cents a share. That was certainly more than average analysts were expecting. And the automotive gross margin, which is an important thing to look at when you're looking at any car maker, came in at 17.1%. That was up quite sharply on the 14.6% in the previous quarter. And, I think expectations were quite low heading into this set of numbers. We've had 4 consecutive bottom line misses and a recent robo-taxi day that sort of left investors quite underwhelmed and with more questions than answers. But it does seem that Musk has really seemed to have left quite the impression with this set of numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. Making some big promises on the earnings call. Musk also, though, did talk about his role in a Trump White House. So these calls obviously are pretty interesting to hear what Musk says. What was he mentioning?
Yeah, well, and also it's important to remember that Musk has directed, about $75 million to the Trump campaign. The billionaire has used the earnings call, to tout for what he would do for a potential job in the Trump administration should the former president actually get back to the White House. He didn't actually mention Trump by name, but he cited a Department of Government efficiency role that the Republican presidential candidate has begun floating for Musk after those many millions that he has directed to his campaign. And if appointed, Musk said he would create a sort of pathway for federal approval of autonomous vehicles instead of the somewhat patchwork network that exists for state regulations currently. And sort of having the green light for autonomous vehicles is something that is very important for Tesla as a company. Musk has said in the past he sees autonomy as one of the most important things for Tesla, over and above just making cars, really.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.